All right, everybody, we are getting ready for our fourth and final panel today, rolling right into it. So don't be afraid to take your own bio breaks as needed. Right now, I'd like to introduce our fourth session, the 2020 PR and Marketing Planning for Startups, called Take Two, What to Do Now. The purpose, 2020 PR and marketing planning was derailed for many companies far too early this year, especially startups who look to 2020 as the year to make their public launch. The pandemic has forced companies to scrap carefully laid plans and marketing plans and adjust at lightning speed to constantly changing conditions. Boy, ain't that the truth. We're now at the midpoint of 2020, and the question is, what comes next for marketers? Despite the ravages of the coronavirus, we're seeing some signs of optimism. Startups are focused on the future and have moved quickly to pivot their products and services to meet the uncertainties of a post-pandemic world. Companies are rethinking business models, looking for new opportunities to help their customers succeed, and aligning their marketing and PR plans accordingly. So how can you take your bearings and set a new marketing course for the remainder of the year? And I'll just really quick note that the reason we chose this panel specifically was because strategic PR is a big wrapper in all of your marketing activities. And it's one way to gain an earned audience by using public relations to reach new and unknown audiences. And you can tie together your community and your thought leadership and your storytelling all under this big PR marketing umbrella. So I'm really excited to hear this panel. Let's bring them in.
Hello.
Hi, how's everybody doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Thanks for introducing us, Dana. Happy to be here in Austin Startup Week.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So real casual, I'm just going to kick it over and then there'll be some Q&A at the end. So I'll see you then.
Sounds good. Thank you. So hi, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us here for our Austin Startup Week panel. My name is Mariana Fischbach. I'm Director of Media Relations at Kettner Group Communications. We are a PR firm based out of the Austin area, focused on B2B technology, with offices as well in New York and Nashville. And I'm super excited. I'll be moderating this panel today, but I'm excited to have with me Laura Russell. She's Senior Director of Marketing at Adlucent. So Laura, quick introduction. She's a creative problem solver and innovative marketer with 12 years of experience spanning business strategy, marketing, and product. She currently serves as the Senior Director of Marketing at Adlucent, which is an Austin-based performance digital agency for retailers, where she leads the company's growth charge by heading up B2B marketing, including branding, communications, lead generation, and product marketing. And prior to Adlucent, Laura worked on the agency side in marketing strategy and solution development, helping her clients solve complex challenges and scale through digital platforms. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And then as well, I have Jonathan Dampierre. He's the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at Reallocate. Jonathan has 25 years of global experience in building and running marketing teams focused on increasing market share and revenue. Jonathan has led strategic marketing efforts for successful startups such as Nugistics, Retail Me Not, and ESO Solutions. He focuses on building high-performing teams and taking companies to the next level through impactful digital marketing strategies and high levels of customer engagement.
Hi, Mariana. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can go ahead and kick it off. We all know what kind of year 2020 has been. We all had a plan starting in January, and then come March, everything was a bit derailed. So from a marketing and PR planning perspective, what are the top 3 lessons you both have learned from how your organization had to pivot this year?
I'll jump in there. I would say test, and test. So a bit of a joke. That's really not my three, but it is my first thing, which is you absolutely have to have a plan, and you need the plan, but you have to continually test every day as you're executing on that plan, and you have to be ready to shift. You have to look at the data as you're testing, and you have to be willing to follow that data and go where it takes you. I would say the second thing is avoiding something called the sunk cost fallacy. That's really just a kind of a fancy way of saying throwing good money after bad. So don't get so emotionally attached to your work that you're forced to continue to invest in it even when the data is telling you that it's not working. We had this earlier this year. We had this big project we'd worked on for several months, and unfortunately we'd sunk money into it, and it wasn't bearing fruit with our early testing. And so it was really hard with all that emotion that we had built into that campaign to step away from it. But because of the things shifting so quickly with COVID, we just had to take a step back and shift our gears. And so I think that's an important thing: is don't throw good money after bad. Listen to your data. The third thing I would say is leverage your subject matter experts. During these uncertain times, your prospects are looking for advice. They're looking for insights. And so, fluffy content really doesn't cut it, in a time like this where people just have really acute problems and new problems that they need to know how to solve. And so what you need to do is, find those subject matter experts within your organization, work with them, and start to create content that from those experts that will answer those immediate problems that your prospects have.
Yeah, I would agree completely with Jonathan's points. The only things I would add to that, based on what we've seen at Adlucent, is one, we've, kind of to Jonathan's point about pivoting and letting go of your plan. We've seen that a lot in our business, kind of on the lead generation side of things for our agency. We have always relied heavily on trade shows for our new business. I think trade shows probably drive about 80% of our leads and our closed won deals. So with trade shows all being canceled, I think our marketing team was like, what do we do now? Like, how are we going to get business to sustain us through the rest of the year? And so what we started to do was shift to investing in paid media. We kind of started trying to take the webinar route and digital communications route, which are of course very important as well, but it's so highly saturated. And what we had to do was just figure out, where do we shift that budget that we were spending traditionally on trade shows to paid media, and then of course do that very carefully so that we're actually getting the payoff that we need to get. So that would kind of be the first thing we learned is, you have to be willing to shift your marketing budget to places you maybe hadn't considered previously, or maybe didn't work in the past, because the landscape's different, and it's changing. And so you kind of have to figure out how to adapt to that. The other thing I would add is be willing to take risks. So when COVID first hit, none of our competitors, who are all performance marketing agencies for retailers, were talking about COVID. And meanwhile, the impact on retail with stores shutting down and e-commerce was enormous. So what Adlucent did is we put out a piece of content very quickly on retail trends we were starting to see, how we were kind of adapting our clients' campaigns. And it was very scrappy and like 80-20, probably not even 80-20. It was like 60-40 because none of us knew what was going on at that point. But we were one of the first people out there in our space talking about COVID and saying, this is what you need to do as a retailer. And as such, we got, a lot of kind of media attention from it, but Google also gave us the first right to co-host a webinar with them, speaking on this subject, since we were so ahead of the curve, which of course helped with our share of voice. The other thing along the vein of risk taking is, a lot of our clients, we manage their performance ad spend. They freaked out and just paused ad campaigns because it was so uncertain and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what their competitors were doing. The ones that didn't pause and instead ramped up their ad spend won big because all their competitors dropped out of the auction and they were able to show up in a more cost-effective way that they couldn't have previously. So they kind of made hay while the sun was shining, so to speak. But by being willing to take that risk, they saw tremendous gains. So I know taking risk is scary, but it's kind of one of the things that we learned both for our business and for our clients, that in a situation like this, it's been, those risks can pay off really big.
Very nice. And along the lines of, taking risk, looking back at this year, what would you say was what worked the best? What necessarily wasn't the best idea? Kind of an overview of, from a communications perspective, what do you see working? What do you see maybe not being the best path forward?
Yeah, so for us, what worked really well was we created a small kind of scrappy council of leaders in the company from all different areas to keep a finger on the pulse of what was going on and quickly make decisions, the keyword being quickly. I think the larger your company is, sometimes you can get very quickly bogged down in the bureaucracy or layers of approval or kind of getting buy-in from everyone. So what I would kind of look back and reflect on what worked, and what I would recommend to everyone listening is, create that hyper-focused team that, maybe you meet weekly, maybe it's daily, depending on the situation, but that's kind of your like emergency response team that has the autonomy to make decisions and make sure you can change and pivot quickly. Quick being the keyword here. I would say what didn't work was kind of our tendency to be a little bit naive, which I think all of us maybe were hopeful that back in March, this will all be over in a couple months. Like by June 1st, stores will be open, like bars will be open, COVID will be gone, like we'll be good. Well, it's October. We're still in a pandemic. Things are still not completely great. And we did not anticipate the length of time and brevity of the situation. So I think one of the things we kind of learned was don't place a hopeful kind of mental investment in this outcome that could go in any direction. And if you had told us back in March that come Q4, all of our trade shows, all of our client visits, things like that would all be canceled, we wouldn't have believed it. Like we were still planning for those things to all happen later this year. So it was definitely a learning experience to not bank on the fact that our old methods would be around forever. And it really, really forced us to, to Jonathan's point, to test, and adapt and kind of let go of the old plan.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say for us, we sharpened our ability to quickly react, and then pivot based on that testing, based on the market feedback. And, what we found out was that we had all this, long form content that we were going to spend a bunch of money on over the year, and something new for each quarter. And we just abandoned that. We realized right away that things were moving too quickly and customers were having new problems that they needed solved. And, that long range planning just had to take a back seat. That was yesterday's way of doing marketing. So we were able to pivot with that. We went to much, shorter form content. And, we tapped into a ton of, experts within our company who, could tell us, that had been in our prospects' shoes at one time before they joined our company. And they could tell us, hey, if this was me, these are the things I'd be worried about. And so, and we found that our audience really preferred that shorter, insightful content, and saved us a lot of money also in the long run. So, basically they were telling us we have these specific problems at this moment. So we basically turned into like a newsroom where we were, every day we were cranking out new and different type of content. And so I think being able to react that quickly to the market really worked for us. I'd say what didn't work is as I mentioned, the long-term content projects that we had with agencies. Things were just moving too rapidly, and as I mentioned earlier, we had to abandon a couple of those projects, even though we had money that was sunk into them. But it, ended up being the right thing to do.
Nice. And in terms of, what advice would you give a startup right now looking to pivot their marketing strategy, today and moving forward?
Well, I'm a firm believer that marketing starts with your story. And, everything you do in marketing basically is amplifying that story. And so, there's a lot of fancy software out there, a lot of, interesting new digital approaches to the market. And it's tempting to really just kind of get out there right away and just start talking, as much and fast as you can. But, my advice would be that you slow down, you kind of go slow to go fast. And you slow down and you make sure that you have that right story and that the story is compelling, it's unique, and you really have nailed the highest value proposition that you have to your customers. Otherwise, when you automate something, if it's bad, you're just automating bad things that go faster and are and louder in the market. So you just want to make sure your story is right, and it is worth taking the time to make sure that story is right. I would also say review your positioning. Make sure, as I mentioned, that your value prop is very clear, and that you are telling the customers how you are uniquely solving that problem. A lot of other competitors are trying to solve the same problem, but what makes you unique in that way? That's how you cut through the clutter. We talked before about testing and adjusting. So, things move very rapidly, so you don't want to get caught behind in prospects thinking. You always want to have your finger on the pulse to know, what are the problems that they're solving. And then I would say when you are, creating content, make sure it's insights driven. It has to be something that whether you do, surveys with your customers or whatever way that you have to be able to figure out what those problems are that your prospects are trying to solve. And you have to help them think about ways to solve those problems in a different and new way. And hopefully your solution, eventually leads to that new way. So bottom line is you got to have the right story. That's worth investing the time.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. I think that's a really strong foundation. My kind of advice would be, on how to adapt marketing right now would be, one, over communicate to your customers. So more than ever, people are looking to buy from companies or work with companies that they believe in ethically and, can align with more on a personal beliefs level. So communicate who you are and why you do what you do, like not just what you do, but why, because that is becoming more and more of a differentiator, especially in the tech and startup space. You can use, of course, earned and owned and paid to communicate this, but just make sure it's authentic and you're not virtue signaling. So if you're focusing on some kind of cause or part of some kind of, movement or philanthropic effort, make sure it's real and you kind of believe in and live by the values that you're using in your marketing. But we are finding that to be a more interesting way to differentiate since it's so top of mind for everyone right now. More than ever. And I would say the second thing is listen to the experts. So I work for an agency, Mariana obviously is from an agency, so we may be a little bit biased here, but using a trusted consultant or some kind of agency that has access to research, data, visibility into other businesses in your space who can help you with the best strategy. They'll have the resources to help you pivot quickly and make the best decisions. Kettner is great at this, for example, in the PR realm, because they know the publications, they know what writers want to talk about, what will hit, what won't, and they'll really help your team figure out how to spend your time and resources in the best way. And these are things most in-house teams aren't able to scratch the surface of. And even at Adlucent, being that we're a marketing agency, we often work with other marketing agencies and hire other agencies to help us, because you have to kind of realize that, especially in a time like this, you cannot be the expert at everything. You can't know it all and you can't possibly do it all. So don't be afraid to kind of listen to this and shift your investments needed to those types of services that will help you more in the long run.
Very nice. And Jonathan, Laura, you both kind of talked about this a little bit as well, with in-person events completely being taken off the table, various budgets that you had allocated being completely just turned around. What advice would you give to startups looking to reallocate all that marketing budget, that was going to go to something else that is not there anymore?
Yeah, I mean, what we've done is we constantly reforecast our goals and budget. So we forecast every month, even regardless of COVID and all the stuff that's been going on recently. We constantly reevaluate where we're at, what's realistic, what we're going to hit, and how much we can spend in order to maintain our EBITDA, which is kind of our, company-wide KPI that we focus on. And so you kind of have to reforecast that and ask yourself, like, does success still look the same? What are those numbers going to look like? Obviously, in a lot of businesses, that forecast, unfortunately, is pulled way back and budgets are pulled way back. But doing that on a regular basis and getting in the habit of that, like I said, even if there's not a national or worldwide pandemic going on, is a good habit to get into so that you can constantly be reevaluating and reallocating. And with that, you kind of have to determine which KPI is the most important to our business right now. And maybe right now is just the next month, maybe it's the next quarter, maybe it's the whole year. It could be profitability, EBITDA, like I mentioned, top line revenue, new customer acquisition, maybe it's customer retention. Of course, all of these things are always important, but understanding which one is the most important in your immediate line of sight will give you and your team very clear direction on how you need to focus your time and efforts. And I can speak volumes for what that's done for us at Adlucent, because we have, our entire team pointing in the same direction and focused on the same goal, which will, of course, increase your chances of getting there instead of having everyone running in different directions. So I think that's a really, really important step. And then I'll kind of reiterate what Jonathan shared earlier about testing. When it comes to kind of reallocating your marketing budgets and learning how to pivot, you have to be willing to test new methods that you haven't previously. What we typically recommend is allocating a portion of your budget to just testing. We call it our sandbox. And this is money that we're willing to lose. Hopefully we won't lose it, and that's the point of testing, right? But we want to learn from that money, and we're willing to lose it so that we can make more gains in the future. So I would usually recommend like 10 to 20% of your marketing budget, of course, depending on your margins, be allocated towards a sandbox to use just for testing purposes to figure out what will work and what won't.
Yeah, totally agree. 10% minimum is good advice. Yeah, I think for reallocating budgets, the first thing in my mind is like, where can you spend money that has the quickest impact? And I think intent-based marketing is the way to go there. I mean, you want to invest in prospects that are actively showing interest in your area of expertise. So there are tools out there like Bombora, Terminus, Sixth Sense that will tell you who those people are that are out there searching for whatever it is that you do. And to be able to get your hands on that data, that's smart money to be able to start putting that money towards people who, already are out there shopping and have the intent. So that's the first thing I would do. Secondly, I would stop and take a look and think about, how do I focus where I can have the most impact? So I would look at the funnel. And so, it depends on, your company and your, where you are as far as in the growth cycle of a company. But if you're struggling with awareness and you're new and that sort of thing that you need to do, I would invest more at the top of the funnel. If you are getting a seat at the table and you are being invited to present and have these meetings, but for whatever reason you seem to be getting passed over and you don't make it to round 2 or 3, then I would invest in that middle of the funnel. And then if you're in a situation where your deals are stalling and they're slowing down, then I would look at the latter parts of the sales cycle and invest in the bottom of the funnel. So those are the first 2 things I would do to make sure that the money I'm spending is getting the fastest return and then having the most impact. Another little thing I think that you can think about when you're reallocating money from from these big event budgets is think small and maybe do some smaller events. And obviously these are digital events, but these could be mini events for different audiences. So everybody out there, you have 3 audiences. You have the C-suite, who you have to convince that the money's worth spending. You got that middle level management who probably manages up to the C-suite and sells to them. They also manage down, so they know about the technology and how to use the tools. And then you've got that user level, and all 3 of those are very important. So you should have different messages for each of those three. And then you can have events that are strictly for, for example, the company I work for, we do AI for pricing for retail. And so, we do a thing called pricing fluency for the C-level. And that says, your organization needs to have pricing fluency as part of its DNA. That's a completely different message when we go to the mid-level and the lower level. So, you can do some small digital events, webinars, et cetera. And some of those, they could even be, on demand with an expert talking about a topic. But, segment out those three audiences. For example, we put together at my company recently something called Reallocate Price IQ. And the tagline was raise your pricing intelligence in 20 minutes or less. And we were able to look at the content that had been downloaded. We could see what was the most popular. And so we knew those were the things that would get the most interest. And then we just had internal experts go on Zoom. It took about 30 minutes to do a 20-minute webinar, and we spun it out. So there are things you can do that don't cost a lot of money. You don't have to do these big, huge things. You can do small things as long as you're hitting on the right topics. That's all your customer cares about. They don't care about the fancy production. They just want to know that you can solve their problem.
And from an event perspective, with everything going virtual now, how do you continue to innovate and maybe fight off some of that Zoom fatigue? Maybe break above the noise in terms of like all these virtual events. How do you get your story right to be able to stand out above the noise and have these users join you?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the thinking small, so that's definitely one thing that you can do. Repurposing a lot of content, segmented by audience, so that it's highly, highly relevant. So when they receive that invitation, they know that this is right in my wheelhouse and I want to know about this. The other thing is, we sort of figured out that talking heads right now are just not as desirable as hearing other customers like me talk about the same problems that you have and how we have solved that. And so we've done some things to, we formed a pricing council where we invite people to come in, and we very lightly branded, but folks can come in and they can have these conversations and, share their experiences. And it's not really about us, it's just about the category. But obviously we go along with that. And the other thing is try to put your customers in front of prospects, as often as you can. And that could be one customer, one video. The video could last 15 or 20 minutes. It's a on-demand webinar where you pick one problem, one topic, and you have one customer who will sit down with you, do an interview, and talk about how they're dealing with that. We just had our, actually earlier today, we had our conference, our user conference, and we opened it up for the first time ever to all prospects because it's digital. And the thing that made it a home run was we had 15 different customers who were willing to come out and talk about these 5 specific problems that everybody has. So I would definitely lean hard on the customer angle and do it in a way that it's a win for the customer as well. So it gives them some press and makes them look very smart, helps their career, but also in a way that helps a prospect understand in somebody else's language who is more credible than a marketer.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that, I kind of alluded to our experience with events and those events going virtual. One of the things that we have found to be interesting is just asking our current client base what events they're attending, what they want to see. We always kind of consider our book of clients our little focus group, so to speak, because we are obviously going after more customers like them. So tap into your current customers and current clients, survey them or build those relationships and try to get information from them on what they want to see, because that's usually pretty helpful. One of the things that we've learned is we are not an event company. We are not specialists at this, and we prefer to piggyback on those doing virtual events really well who have the audience we need versus us trying to recreate it all ourselves, which the benefit to that, of course, would be cost savings. But if you don't get anyone to attend, there's no point, right? And you've just spent all of these time and resources. So unless you are very well equipped and you have a team who can do these virtual events, or come up with a better way to kind of do this event marketing, I recommend, based on what we have found, pay the money, sponsor the ones that are going on in the industry that are doing it really, really well. It'll be worth it. The other thing that I've seen from a recipient point of view when I have been attending events versus holding them for our business, is adding some kind of personal or customized and engaging aspect to it. People are obviously Zoom fatigued, as Mariana said, and logging on to yet another webinar is like, at this point, I can't. It's just like I see webinar on my subject line in my inbox and I don't even open it because it's a lot. And you guys are all sitting here at home right now listening to this, attending a webinar. So I feel for you. But one thing that I saw Google do really well at Adweek this year, which is going on right now, I'm going to preface that with, I know we don't all have Google budget, but I like to take the examples from the big guys and then figure out how we can kind of follow suit. But what Google did is they had a session going on at Adweek that they were trying to, get people to attend. And if anyone here has ever attended Adweek or any kind of big conference, there are a million sessions a day, and it is impossible to kind of sort through them all and figure out which ones you want to attend. So what Google did was they sent an email to everybody attending ahead of time, asking if we were interested in attending their session specifically. And then we did this, they had us do this survey that was all themed around music and mixtapes. And they had you kind of fill out what kind of music you like, when you listen to music, what you want to hear more about from Google, et cetera, et cetera. And they asked for your address. So lo and behold, yesterday in the mail, I get a box from Google on my doorstep, and I felt like a kid on Christmas opening it up. And it was this personalized box with my name on it and a card inviting me to attend their session. And it had, so I had filled in the survey that I listen to music when I work out. So this box had all of this workout equipment in it, which is worth millions of dollars nowadays. If you've ever gone on Amazon and looked for dumbbells, they're impossible to find. So I greatly appreciated this gift, and it was super customized to what I had filled out in the survey results. And it, of course, was to kind of be self-promotional, but I appreciated it. And then at the same time, I got an email in my inbox right before their session started with a personalized playlist based on the types of music I said that I liked, and an invitation again to attend their session. So I attended their session, and they definitely got my attention, and it was a really, really cool and albeit expensive way to kind of personalize and add that interactive element that I hadn't seen really any other companies do before. And it definitely got my attention. So I think, like I said, we don't all have Google budget, and it's hard to kind of do that level of experience and gift giving, but even if you can do something along those lines to innovate and kind of stand out and differentiate a little bit more in this event space to get people to kind of pay attention, I think anything personalized always goes a long way. I mean, who doesn't like getting something with their name on it or something that's kind of catered to their interests? So when it comes to kind of innovating from an event perspective, get creative and think outside the box of ways that you can kind of create a memorable experience for the people you want to attend versus just another virtual event that, you kind of feel like there's millions of people out there and no one's listening. So try to stand out basically and get creative in doing so.
Excellent. And, hard to believe it's October now. We're in Q4, almost 2021. We'll see what 2021 brings. But, what advice would you give to, startups, companies, organizations who are maybe coming fresh on the scene in 2021, planning to launch their company, planning to start, connecting with customers? What do you think, are the top 3 things that they should be doing or thinking about as we move into the new year?
Sorry, I thought Laura was going to take that one. So, yeah,
I'll let Jonathan take this one.
I'm going to just stay on my soapbox here, but I think it's really important that you get your house in order before you start thinking about maybe the tactics that you should use to, spread your message. Make sure you have that message right. And there's just a number of foundational things to help you do that. Make sure you understand your prospects. You have to develop empathy. You really have to have this deep understanding of their problems. What are their headaches? What are their desires? Map out how they buy. Where do they get the information? Who do they trust? From whom do they seek advice? This goes beyond the typical persona where, you talk about what type of car somebody drives, or, that doesn't really matter. When you go to work every day, you have certain headaches that are bothering you. You have certain, challenges that you have to meet, and you need help, curing those ills. So understand your prospect, very, very important. The other thing is you got to understand yourself. So you got to take a little bit of time, and you need to figure out, like, how do we uniquely solve these issues and these problems? What's that highest, value proposition? And, get to use some fancy language here real quick. You really need to understand your brand archetype. And that's just a simple way of saying kind of your brand personality. And it's the only way to ensure that your voice can be authentic and what you're saying is authentic. I just recently was at a company where, we figured out that we were talking in 3 different personalities. So we had like this multiple personality disorder. We were the leader in the space, and everybody copied us. So this entire industry was talking in this, multiple personality disorder. And the way that we were able to rise above that was really spend the time examining, ourselves and what is our, archetype. There's look that up, brand archetypes. There are 12. We figured out which archetype we were and stayed in that lane. And we created all our new messaging, our stories, and everything that stayed in that lane. And it really was who we are and how we approached our customers and how we approached the market. And you just can't imagine how powerful that is when you can tap into what you really are. And as Laura said earlier, the why behind why you're here. And it is so powerful, and you will leave your competitors in the dust who are speaking all this marketing speak, because you will just cut right to the chase and really have a powerful message. So understand your prospects, understand yourself, and then again, that's all going to lead to a really compelling story that when you go out into the marketplace, then you can start thinking about what are these tactics that I'm going to do. So I'll leave the tactics up to Laura after I've talked about the foundational stuff first.
The only thing I would really add, I agree with all that. The main thing I would add, which is something that we're doing more and more in our business, is focusing on our customer stories. So, we've always spent a ton of time and attention focusing on our thought leadership, and we're the experts, and we have this great technology and like all this awesome stuff. But like this year, a lot of our clients went through it. Like we had some clients go out of business. We had some clients lose, huge parts of their teams. We've had some clients do extremely well. And, talking about those stories and using that as part of our brand positioning and value prop moving forward, we're hoping, it hasn't happened yet, but that's kind of going to be our approach that we're hoping has big payoffs because, to Jonathan's point earlier, we can talk about ourselves all day long, but the fact of the matter is customers want to hear what other customers are going through and people like them are going through in businesses like them. And so, showcasing those use cases, case studies, any results that you have been able to drive, getting those clients permission upfront, of course, which can always be a little bit tricky to do so, but showcasing those client stories, that's a big shift that Adlucent's making going into 2021. Like, we don't want to talk about ourselves and our technology anymore. We want to talk about our clients, the challenges that they've had, because they have been immense and their industries have been extremely volatile this year, and, how they've solved them, of course, with us helping. So anywhere you can, talk about the, if it's part of your brand, of course, talk about the customer challenges, the client challenges. And I think that that'll really resonate with people.
Agree. Mariana, just to add real quick, we didn't talk about PR with that, and so I just want to throw that in there. So I've have launched startups where I'm totally bootstrapping it, and I've launched it where I have lots of money. So if you have lots of money, definitely talk to Kettner Group or another PR agency, and they can really help you figure things out. If you're bootstrapping, one of the things you can do is just read daily, to understand what the issues are that are affecting your audience. that way you can help spot those trends early. I mean, just really immerse yourself in whatever industry you're in, do a ton of reading. I always found very helpful to read, the big consulting firms like McKinsey, folks like that. They have their pulse on pretty much every industry and just deliver great insights where you can really understand that. The other thing is do surveys. If you are B2B2C, so if your customer that you're serving has a consumer on the other end, do consumer surveys. And, I can tell you this, at Nugistics, we grew from $5 million to $250 million in 4.5 years. And I did that mostly on the back of a $10,000 survey that we did. And from that, we created insights that were unreal about what consumers were thinking about the problem that existed in the market, that opened the eyes of the business. They had no idea. So surveys can be a really great tool to get attention as well and to learn yourself. There's a couple other tricks. You can look at industry publisher websites that have comment sections after their articles, and you can have your subject matter experts. Some of them have a thing called a brain trust that you can join, or you can just go into those articles and you go in it and comment. Have an expert that, a couple of experts on hand you can go to depending on the topic, and that can start to build your name up as well. I've said that before, but promote your experts. Don't promote yourselves. I've never been, a head of marketing who needed to get my name out there. It's not about me. It's about solving the customer's problem, and put your experts out in front because that's who they want to hear from. And then just with PR, you want to be visible. You want to be insightful as much as you can to help them give them new ways to think about solving problems, but you got to be believable. You have to be believable to develop that trust. Don't go out there with, stats that you can't support. And, obviously we're marketing. Okay. We have our own, version of reality, but don't go overboard. I mean, you've got to be, because journalists will see that, and then you're not going to get press after that. So make sure that it's authentic and it's believable.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, and I know we have about 4 minutes left, and we do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience. The first one is, Jonathan, earlier you mentioned 3 sources that you can use in terms of planning, events, etc. I think you mentioned a couple tools to look into. So if you want to maybe drop them here into the comment box or talk about those.
I don't remember 3 tools for planning. I think I did talk about 3 tools for intent-based marketing.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So those are Bombora and let's see, 6 Sense and blanking out. Oh, Terminus, Terminus. Those are 3 of the companies. But you can just Google intent-based data. And then Laura, you may know of some others.
I don't know if I've mentioned any in particular, but those ones sound good to me. We've used Terminus before. I agree with those.
Yeah. And just Google it, and there are a lot of different companies that do that. Those are the ones that are the best. They're a little more expensive than some of the others. They have a more fully realized program. But even Bombora, I think, is probably the least expensive, and it at least can get you started down the path, and so that you can find out who those people are that are out there searching for what you do, for what you solve.
Excellent. And then another question coming from the audience: where should unallocated budget from canceled events, etc., be used to ensure success?
Yeah, I can chime in here because this is a big one for us. I mean, the way that we have decided to reallocate that budget. Well, first of all, our budgets were on hold for a really long time, which I'm sure a lot of you have had to deal with as well. So it has been very tricky to kind of navigate coming back into spending on marketing again. Where do we put it? So you're not alone in kind of having to figure out that challenge. I think we're all there. What we've done is we've reallocated the canceled event and trade show budget towards paid media and sponsorships. And some of those are virtual events. So paying to, have one of our experts speak at some kind of, industry event. But we've invested a lot in paid media, and it's worked pretty well so far, because we're able to get, pretty specific in who we're reaching and what publications we're aligning with and things like that. So that's kind of been our plan so far. It's been a mix of virtual events and paid media, and of course a little bit of PR as well, but we kind of have always had that going on. That wasn't necessarily something we started just from canceled events.
Yeah, I can tell you, we shifted a pretty good bit of that money over to creating some of those on-demand webinars, so that, and again, we made them 15, 20 minutes. So, everybody has 15 minutes that they can take and brush up on something that in their industry is really important to them. I had another thought, but I can't remember what it was. So it'll come to me later.
All right, excellent. Well, I know we have about a minute left, but thank you both so much for joining the panel. But, for any other questions that the audience has, what's the best way to get in contact with you both?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Laura Russell J, or just look for Laura Russell Austin. It should come up. Or you can go to edlucent.com. And fill out a contact us and request me, or even if you want to talk to someone else.
Yeah, I would say for me, LinkedIn. And that reminds me of the other thing I was going to say. We did shift a lot of money to LinkedIn. Highly recommend it. It's actually very affordable, much less expensive than you would think, more, as far as digital marketing is concerned. And I think your previous guest was talking about how they're like, 4 years behind in reporting. That's all very true. But the targeting, if you're in B2B, the targeting in LinkedIn is amazing, and really is a lot less expensive than a lot of other digital marketing. Anyway, but to reach me, my LinkedIn profile is the easiest way. Send me an email, and just, if you'll notate that you heard me through this, and I'll be happy to communicate with you.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jonathan, Mariana, and Laura. It was really great to hear your insights and feedback, and I'm sure our startups pulled a lot of value from your conversation. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. All right. Well, that concludes today's marketing and branding session. Thanks again for spending your afternoon here with us. One more plug for the 2020 Mass Challenge Virtual US Awards happening October 22nd at 4 p.m. Central Time, with keynote speakers Ariana Huffington and Linda Pizzuti Henry from the Boston Globe. We look forward to seeing you there. You can register for tickets at masschallenge.org/awards. Outside of that, Austin Startup Week, we'll see you tomorrow. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on Twitter at StartupSuiteD. And on LinkedIn at Dana Wildeboer, and you spell that last name Wildeboer. I hope you took notes. Have a good one. Thank you.